Welcome back to Breaking the Silence. And tonight, eventually, because he's not here yet, we'll have Whitley Strieber on. In the meantime, you do know that we had some trouble, or we are having some trouble with YouTube, and we got a hat on. I've been driving a sports car all day as a break. And they've been putting that tag on, that goes to Wikipedia. And of course, Wikipedia is a rag. It's there's nothing official about it. It's just some place where you can go and the skeptics can go and say anything about anybody. And people believe it's true because it's on Wikipedia, but it's not. And they put that tag on our videos because evidently the bots were attracted by the word alien abduction. And of course, that led to the algorithms going woohoo. And we were getting, views 40 to 50 to 70 to 150 to 175,000 views on our videos, and it just dropped off like nobody's paying attention anymore. There may be other reasons for that, but in general, the one with Yvonne about the Coronado, that should have got a lot more views, and it didn't. In fact, it hardly got any, and you can tell by the likes. So there's something going on, some form of skullduggery going on. But, not to worry, because I'm going to be on a number of different podcasts coming up. One of them is actually a radio show, a coast-to-coast type, one called Dream Radio, that has 7 million listeners. So as we spread out across the airwaves and more people find out about us, we'll get more subscribers and more views that way, and more likes and all that kind of stuff, and it will help build this. So there is a way around it. And also, of course, we're not going to be using that word anymore. That we're going to the AA word, which I always slipped and said, but I don't think they listened to the audio. But yeah, we're going to be changing how we do things, saying close encounters, of the third kind, fourth kind, fifth kind, and so on and so forth. And you will know that's the same thing. Whether or not the general public, who's not that well educated about this stuff, will or not, I'm not going to use that term, which I've never liked anyway, to attract their attention. If that's what I need to do, is shine some sparkly, sensational name to get their attention, I don't care. So Whitley is obviously having some sort of problem because he's not in here. I don't check my phone to see if maybe he didn't get the link or something. I don't know. Because if he doesn't, if he has a problem, then you're stuck with me, and it's up to you if you want to keep doing the show tonight, or just go offline for tonight and have him back another time. Things do happen. So I don't personally have a lot to talk about tonight. There's been
okay, I'm just gonna fucking
there's been not that much going on. Last night was absolutely horrendous night. That holiday they really celebrated last night, which will remain in my vocabulary nameless, was nothing like being in the middle of World War III. My dog was absolutely freaked out on the bed, and I couldn't get any sleep last night, and I'm just a mess today from it. And I never want to experience.
Whitley, were you having trouble with the link?
I never want to experience that again. So.
No, it's now.
So. Anyway.
All right, thank you.
Mary just called him.
It was at 5.
Oh, he thought it was at 5. Okay. You got to understand, Whitley is extremely busy, and I'm amazed he took out time to be on the show. But I asked him the other day, and he said, "Oh, sure, I'll go on your show again, no problem." And it's like, okay, but you're in the middle of writing a book. No, it's not. There's not as much pressure with it right now, and so I'd be happy to do that. I wanted you all to get a chance to thank him. I have for the last, God, how long has it been? He called me in 1990, and we've been friends since 1990. I don't know how many years that is, but 35, something, I don't know. Maybe not that many. But a lot of years. And he's always been there for me, and he's helped me through all kinds of terrible times, and we've helped each other through terrible times because we both lost wives to cancer, and he's been a big supporter. of my projects. He's been in my movies, but the main thing for me is, besides he's my friend, is that I don't think all of us would be here right now if it wasn't for him. It wasn't for communion, because that was really what opened up the whole can of worms that made what we're doing right now possible. And that's to get together and have a conversation about this amazing phenomenon. So you should pop in here in a minute. So what do you think? Would we be here without communion and Whitley's efforts? So, and all the sacrifices he's made. Are you guys paying attention? You seem like you're talking about, I don't know, contraceptives or something. I don't know. That won't keep them from getting your, you know what. So, Lynn LR. Hello, Lynn LR. I don't think I've seen you here before. But I'm really glad you're here. When Moon at Noon, you're new, and I appreciate you being here as well. Probably not. He blazed a trail. Yes, Nicholas, and I think you're new too. I may be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. And of course, Anne, I expect to get that from you. And oh, I sent you the photos of the orange light in my session, and there's Whitley. I'm going to bring him on right now because he's a very busy guy. Hi.
Hi. I apologize for being
No,
late.
that's okay. You're a busy guy.
Well, I am busy, but I'm not that busy. I got the time wrong. So
Oh, that's okay. You're here, and we very much appreciate that. And we were just talking about you, good things, about how none of us would be here having this conversation right now or interacting with each other in this wonderful community if it hadn't been for you and your book, Communion, which started it all off. I mean, because you have to understand, you allowed us to suddenly connect dots that we couldn't do until that point, because we had no idea that anyone else was experiencing what we thought was individual to us.
well, Bud Hopkins deserves some of the credit too, and
Oh,
so
sure.
does Anne, my wife Anne. But it's true that the book initiated contact. You know, if I'd had the slightest idea that would happen, is my audio okay?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay.
Can everybody hear Whitley okay?
Okay, if I had the slightest idea that would happen, I don't think I could have written the book. But I had no idea. Bud thought that maybe 25 or 30 people had the experience in the United States based on his research and he had a number of people in his group at the time, but he thought he was sure it was under 100. And the publisher, though, the editor had a different sense of it. He thought that the book was going to be a big sensation, and I was just sort of rolling with it. But no one expected what happened, that there would be millions of people around the world who had seen that face. This face.
Thank you. And that is the original painting that
This
you've
is the
had.
original painting. That's correct. Yes.
People don't often get to see it and don't realize it's such a small painting, but that small painting made a huge impression on the world.
It did indeed, because so many people had seen the face and had thought either I'm alone, this has never happened to anybody else, or it's a dream. But it wasn't, apparently not. It's something somewhere between this ordinary reality and dream. But in the end, when you strip away all of the confusion and all of the hypnosis and missing time and whatever else goes on, there's somebody there in the physical world, and they do this to us. That's the bottom line.
I think it feels so dreamlike at times because we do exist in a dream world and in which is the spiritual part of us and the physical world both at the same time. And I think they do too. At least they certainly have the capability of doing it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Incidentally, the picture behind me is Anne, and beside it is a painting by a young artist in England called Liberty Noakes. And you can find her on Instagram, and she's just getting ready to do her first show. And I think she's a brilliant artist. It's not her best painting, but it's one of her early ones. The ones that
Yeah,
she's
I
showing
wish
now
I
are
could.
dynamite.
I wish I could get a better look at it, but it did capture my attention. Of
Yeah,
course, I
well,
love
that's
that.
why I mentioned it and why it's up there, because I want her to succeed with her effort to become an artist. And it's LIBERTYNOAKES. And she's on Instagram. And I'm sure she'd be delighted to get more followers.
Yeah, I'm sure she would. Mary, could you find that and maybe put a link up? You can try.
Text the name.
Oh, good. But the question is, where are we now with this? And I'm working on a new book that is attempting to dimensionalize that in completely new ways, because we can do certain things now that we couldn't do before. If you're careful and you're very analytical and you page through like the communion letters that are at Rice University, that incidentally have all been digitized now and will soon be available to scholars and eventually the general public, which means that we can apply AI to those letters and do all kinds of things with them that we weren't able to do before. In any case, the new book, what you can do, and this took a long time, it was not easy, is bit by bit and piece by piece, you can fit together how the anatomy of the visitors works and what it's like and what it is and how their minds work simply by analyzing what has happened to people. And a picture emerges that's really at once kind of wonderful and once more than a little disturbing. The wonderful part is that they have a lot of powers that we know. I mean, they can appear and disappear, they can levitate, they can do all kinds of things. But they don't have any powers that have not been reported among human beings from time to time over the course of history, which is very interesting. The only thing they can do that we can't do is travel very rapidly in small craft that seem to have no source of propulsion. That we cannot do. And that means they have to be using the energy of the universe around them in order to do this, affect this motion. And they have to. Otherwise, there's nothing, because there's nothing in there. The one or two reasonably credible people I've talked to who have been close to the disks that we have say there's no propulsion system. And I think that might be true. Of course, the trouble is when you're talking to people who are in the classified world, they may be lying in order to spread disinformation. You just don't know. But that seems to me to be a logical possibility, because it may be that I talked to Hal Puthoff about this, the researcher who's deep into this stuff for a long time, and he worked on 0-point energy, trying to extract 0-point energy for years, and he thinks they can do it, and that's how it works.
And you have heard that there are many people that have come up with 0-point energy since the 50s, and they were mostly all killed.
Well, that would suggest to me that I'm not going to try to come up with 0-point energy.
No.
And
if you did, you'd dump it on the internet for everybody to have, and it would end our problems. A lot of them anyway.
the I can understand if there's somebody here who doesn't want us to get out, then they would react badly if somebody came up with a way out, and that would be a way out.
It would.
So
We wouldn't need gas, oil, or lithium batteries anymore.
yeah, I don't think we've got now 14 successive administrations who have refused to release anything. And the Congress in the 1960s, the NICAP and had congressional hearing under Admiral Hillenkoetter, who had been the CIA director, for goodness sakes, who was basically saying this is all real and let's get this truth out there. Nothing happened. Eisenhower administration wouldn't budge. Then during the when was it in the late 1990s, I was peripherally involved in a Senate Select Committee on Intelligence to do exactly what they're trying to do now. But their approach was they were trying to get the NSA to just tell them the truth. And they were using me to try to come up with questions that would be hard for the NSA to answer without lying, which is illegal, although I'm sure they do it in Congress all the time. Now, once again, we have the major effort that is being thwarted by the administration. John Podesta, at the end of the Obama administration, said his greatest regret was that the UFO information had not been released, and Obama wouldn't release it. And there's something these presidents know that not even their closest advisors know, because John was as close to Obama as he could get. And obviously, he did not know the reason for the secrecy. And I think it's very clear that the reason for the secrecy is that we are in touch with someone and they are very powerful and they don't want their secret revealed. And that gets right back to the abductions. That's where we are. And I can understand the Air Force doesn't want that revealed because they are supposed to protect us from threats from above.
Yeah.
Well, this is about the most extraordinary threat from above you can imagine.
Yes.
And are they protecting us? Not in my life and not in yours. Not in any of us experiences. Absolutely not. So they want to keep it secret. And the rest of the Defense Department, God only knows how much of the black budget goes into this. It could be enormous amounts of money. The Pentagon just casually says, well, we don't have any inventory of what we possess, and we don't know where a lot of the money goes. We can't balance the books.
Yeah.
And they say that openly because they know perfectly well that the people inside the committee, the oversight committees and the administration do know the answers to these questions, and they're secret. That's why they say that in the public. And Donald Rumsfeld, weekend of 9/11, goes on the air and says, "Oh, by the way, the Pentagon's lost $1 trillion." He chooses that Saturday. Tell us that massive, incredible story, and the story, of course, goes nowhere.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, no one's really paying attention or cares, and there's such what seems to me a smokescreen going on right now, taking people's attention off of this subject as much as possible. It's because it's something they want to see happen. You know, Whitley, in since we started breaking the silence, so it was 6-7 months ago now. It's barely been that long. One of the things I find most interesting about being in contact with so many people who have this experience is some of the things that stand out, that are very common about them. One is almost every time we put someone in front of the camera to tell their story, they start off by saying they remember being born practically. They remember seeing visitors when they're in the crib still. And they also will report over and over again that they felt like they didn't belong here. And the other interesting thing that stands out to me and to Mary, because we're both experiencing this, is that so many of them are creative people, artists, writers, painters, sculptors, We asked about it the other night, and it was just amazing how many people here in chat were coming forward and talking about being creatives. And I wondered if you have noticed that in all these years yourself. I mean, certainly it must have stood out. You and Anne worked with all those letters, but they were talking about their experiences. They really weren't talking about their own character that much.
Not that much, no. A lot of them sent in drawings and paintings and stuff, so they must have been a very creative group of people. A lot of them had Irish last names too, which I always thought was interesting. Irish or, excuse me, Scottish last names. And, the fairy faith of Northern Europe is concentrated in Ireland and Scotland. So I found that quite interesting in view of Jacques Vallée's book, Passport to Magonia, which
Sure.
suggests that this has been going on for a long time and that those fairy folk of the past are the current Greys. And they're probably right about that. Only what's different now is that there's a lot more of them here, and it's a lot more active than it was back in the 19th and 18th centuries. Interestingly enough, if you look at the history of this, it starts to build up in the 17th century in Ireland and in Scotland. The stories go back farther, but they become more prevalent in as if it was gradually starting to grow even way back then. As far as feeling dissociated from society, yeah, I don't at all. I'm very engaged, and if anybody ever was human, it's me, all too human. And so I don't feel that sense of that at all. I did remember, though, my birth. And I was a teenager before I realized other people didn't remember it too, because I was enjoying with some friends, and I happened to describe it, and they all acted like I was crazy or lying, and I was astonished. I thought to myself, why doesn't anybody? I can't believe it. They don't remember this. I don't remember any aliens or anything, but I remember being born very well. I remember going into my mother's womb, and in May of 1945, and I mean, I didn't know it was May, but I can tell by the way the world was as I went in. It was such a gorgeous experience. And then the birth experience is a blur, followed by bright lights and a lot of stomach pain. And that's all I remember. After that, it's gone.
Well, it's remarkable that you remember that. Not everybody does.
That's the strangest thing, is that it never occurred to me that people didn't remember it. Of course, I assumed everyone did. I never talked about it because it wasn't an important memory. I mean, I had no reason to. But there you have it. It turned out that's what it was. And so I think a lot of these people who are in this situation have unusual memories, is what I'm saying. Unusual, structurally unusual memories, not just strange memories, but the system works differently somehow. And
they also, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, they also, another common thread is that when they were young and still today, they were fascinated by the stars in the sky. While other kids were playing football and stuff, they had an interest in astronomy and telescopes and space, and they felt like they're being beckoned by the stars.
I felt like that. I had a
Me too.
planetarium in my room. And I could turn off all the lights and turn on the planetarium and have all the stars go around. It was absolutely magical.
Me too. I'd fall asleep to it.
What?
You'd fall asleep to it.
Yeah. And there was this lady, Eileen Carter, who had an observatory on the roof of her house.
I remember.
And that's all in The Secret School, which I believe you did the cover for.
No, I didn't. No, that was with Demons. But I did some paintings of that. Yeah, and you riding down the street on a bicycle.
There's got to be something wrong with that story, by the way, because I can't believe I could have ridden a bicycle all the way downtown like that in the middle of the night. But something something went on because, like, the other part of it was going to this. For those of you who don't know, the Secret School is about my childhood and about events that happened in the childhood that are related to this stuff, may have happened. Uh, and before I wrote The Secret School, I was very uneasy about the whole thing. What happened was Dr. Klein, Dr. Donald Klein, who originally hypnotized me right after the communion experience, elicited from me a very surprising thing. He asked me at one point, because my voice had changed and I was not aware of this. He said, "How old are you?" And this voice pops out of my mouth. I mean, I was, you're not asleep when you're hypnotized. At least I was.
No, yeah, sure.
So it says 12. And I thought, what in the hell is this? 12? And he began to question me as a 12-year-old. And I began to want to go back to San Antonio and to see if I could pick up any threads from that period. And Mrs. Carter played a huge role because she had this observatory on her roof. She taught astronomy at the local museum, and I took the course. And I went down there, and her house was sort of ramshackle. She was long passed on. But they hadn't touched anything. The magazines were still, the old magazines from the 50s were still in the magazine rack. Upstairs in the attic, all the toys we used to play with were still there from her
Wow.
own children's day. It was just extraordinary. And I opened a trunk in her bedroom, and the odor of her perfume came out. And I just was transported back to that period. And boy, I'll tell you what I was fascinated with. Mars, Mars, Mars.
Yes,
Yeah, I loved Mars.
me too. It's another thread with a lot of these people.
Let me read something. This was written by my son. We just found this a few weeks ago. It was written by my son shortly after his own abduction. And I thought for years that it was lost, but it's not. It's right here. And it's very poetic and doesn't make a lot of sense. He was 9 years old when he wrote this. He wrote this the morning after it happened. It's described in my book Transformation. And it was one of the most awful experiences of my life because I woke up. I would get up every night and check on him in the middle of the night. And one night when I checked on him, there was nobody in the bed. And I ran through the house, panicked beyond belief, ran out in the front yard, feeling completely helpless. And there were these three men out there, very compassionate looking in dark blue clothes and dark blue baseball caps, who came toward me and were trying to comfort me. And in the sky, where there was this huge extra star, obviously he was there. And I screamed out. I tried to get them to do something, and they got me, and they took me back into the house. And when I got back into the house, he was in the bed. And it was not a dream, but I just couldn't figure out. It was very disorienting because they brought him back so quickly. It just was so unexpected. But there he was, and he seemed absolutely fine, sleeping peacefully. And the last thing I wanted to do was wake him up at that point. So I went upstairs and sort of hung out for the rest of the night. I can't say I slept.
Yeah.
In the morning, he was very quiet. I told Anne about it before we got up, and he was quiet. Then he suddenly sat down and just wrote this without an explanation. And here's what he wrote. O thy Colossus, thy stand before me with the twinkling of a beam against the thin pane to see the world along the edge of the earth, to see the golden beam in their eyes. Now, it's very surrealistic, and it's the work of a little 9-year-old boy trying
Wow.
to explain what it was like on a UFO. I'm sure that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our world. That's where the love of space and the stars comes from. I think we've all been there.
I did a painting, I think it was from Secret School, that showed you in your pajamas floating over Mars towards the base. Do you remember that? The base on Mars.
Very, yeah, vaguely, I remember
Yeah.
that. But
I did a number of painting. I loved that book. I mean, I've loved all your books, but I particularly that one.
you know, the thing that's
I
so
could relate to
strange.
all of them.
What?
I could relate to all of them.
Well, great. I'm glad you could. I could too. Obviously, I wrote the book. But
Yeah. No.
the things that bothered me were the bicycling all the way down to Mrs. Carter's house in the middle of the night. In my opinion, that was impossible. And also bicycling to the Almas Basin. Now, those of you who don't know North San Antonio, which is probably all of you, or maybe not, I lived in a neighborhood called Terrell Hills. About 2 miles away, there's a flood basin called the Almas Basin, which floods from the river, and there's no houses in there. And I remember riding my bike to there and then going down into the basin in the night and then up this little trail. It was on a cliffside. And then there was this huge, extraordinarily strange tree. And behind the tree, there were benches. And we would sit on the benches, and this hooded figure would teach us. And just beyond the benches was an old sister's home. She would teach us about the stars, and she would teach us about time and a lot of things like that. And but the problem is, I do not believe that a boy of 12, which would be the age I was at when this was happening, could have made that trip or either of those trips on a bicycle in the middle of the night. There's no way I wouldn't have been too scared to go down in the basin. It was full of snakes and it was impossible. It couldn't happen. But I was ready to dismiss it all until I went to San Antonio and first had the experience of seeing Mrs. Carter's house and finding it so perfectly preserved, as if in amber, like it was waiting for me somehow. And the memories came floating back, of course. And the next thing is that I looked and looked for the tree and never could find it. And then one day, some guy was trying to make a documentary. So we were in there with a camera, and damned if I didn't find the tree. I found it exactly as I had already described it in the book.
It's still there.
It's still there. Absolutely. I'm very cagey about where it is because in this day and time, we are going to be, someone's going to liable to try to cut it down or kill it because we live in a very weird era.
We
Very
sure
much
do.
like the rest of history. This is a very
Look, there's a
weird
tree. Kill it.
We're weird.
Yeah.
Then we react very strangely to fear and stuff, and so I don't want the tree to be destroyed, so I keep it to myself as to where it is. But it is
I'm glad
amazing.
you do.
Yeah, it is amazing that it exists, even extraordinary. So, therefore, and I went up beyond the tree, and there were the benches, ruined, but they were there. So what could that really have been? I think that part of the secret school involved a nun. That's the hooded figure, because there was an old sister's home right a short distance away. And that it probably happened in the afternoon that I was there. It was a very little boy and was taught this stuff by what I assume was an actual nun, and that I worked that kind of into the secret school because it was sort of part of it. But I could not find any one of the people I remembered there, and I talked to most of the ones I remembered there as children. No one remembered it but me. So there's something weird there anyway. But it had to have happened because the tree and the benches were there.
Sure.
They were there. Did it happen in the night? Did we go there in the night in some magical way? God only knows. That's what I would like to believe, but I always go for the more prosaic explanation. I think that's
Mhm.
the way to do
Sure.
this. Not to dismiss the high strangeness explanation, but just to say that the other one is also possible and even probable, more probable.
Always. It's a healthy thing to do, I think.
Yeah, well, if you're going to live, stay sane with this and not let yourself go off into the world of connecting the dots. You have to, because
Yeah.
otherwise you start connecting the dots, and all of a sudden you're a you're a spaceman. I mean, you have to be very careful about that.
You
Confabulating, talking about things that didn't happen and stuff.
mhm. You don't talk often, or at least I haven't heard you talk much about solving the communion,
About what?
solving the communion enigma.
Oh, yeah.
That book really got me because, as so often would happen in your books, you'd write another book and you would talk about things that I'm familiar with. I thought well, only happened to me, and this happened over and over again, and that was one of them. And that was a real different book, but these things happened to you when you were a child,
Yeah.
and it really
Yeah.
struck me because I had my own memories of people coming to the house in San Francisco at night and taking me from the house in a car and taking me to the school where there were lots of other kids in their night clothes, in the hallways of my old school. And the school was dimly lit, and there were men and women there and nurses, and it was just a really strange scene. So when I was reading Solving Communion Enigma, I saw some similarities in what I had remembered, and um, I actually felt that my parents knew something about it.
Mine did. I think they regretted that. That happened to me when I was a little 7-year-old, and what happened
Yeah.
was not good. It didn't work. It was. I ended up at the military hospital near our house in isolation, being given shots of gamma globulin in the in October of 1952, and then isolated in my house for the until the next January because I couldn't be near other children because I had no immune system. What happened was in in July, some couple of Air Force people came recruiting to the house because of it was a program for super intelligent children, and um, I think it still goes on. By the way, I don't think it's gone. I don't think it's as harsh now as it was then, though, because they were just trying to figure out how to do it. And they used a thing called an educational tool called a Skinner box, which you put the kid in and then do this repetitive learning.
B.F. Skinner.
Yeah, and whose
Hmm.
daughter committed suicide, I think, for good reason. But
Hmm.
this was not good for me. It was not good for me. It was very terrifying. And I was a little boy and I couldn't control it. I couldn't explain myself. And I don't remember much except I perceived it as being very dark and an extremely loud noise in it, like screaming. And in October, I began to get very ill and all the time of one cold after another. And the parents took me to the doctor and found I had no immune system. It was all gone. And that was because of stress, apparently. And so I was taken out of school. I was taken out of the program and then treated at Brook General Hospital. A little 7-year-old boy treated at a military hospital was rather unusual. And they were giving me shots of gamma globulin because, they didn't know what else to do to restore my immune system in those days. They had no idea what they were doing. But I vividly remember the fact that once or twice I was a thin little guy, and the needle went through my arm and into my chest because the needles were so long and they were for adults,
Right.
and but uh, uh, I recovered eventually. Eventually I was back home, and I was kept at home, and no one could come near me. My meals were all given to me in my room. And during the day, I could go outside when my sister was not at home, when she was at school. But that was tremendous stress that did that. I know it all happened. It all has a very dreamlike quality to me. But a man who is to this day my closest friend in the world remembers being recruited also. He's also got like a uptillion IQ. And I would suspect that they still do this, and they still look for kids with high levels of intelligence and bring them into programs like this. And I suspect the programs are much better organized and more effective now than they were then.
Yeah. Being dragged off in the night to your school is pretty scary with nurses and doctors around. And
well, yeah, it was Thursday night, and this guy would show up at the house, and I remember going up on the roof and begging the visitors to take me, so he wouldn't take me, and he would come up on the roof and get me and take me down and take me to the Air Force Base where it was being done, Randolph Air Force Base, as I recall.
yeah.
Yeah,
So-
when I was living in San Antonio,
Mhm.
my wife and I went to a pet show with my brother, and Ann and I were in our own car, and on the way back, I went into some kind of weird fugue state, and the highway we were on was near Randolph Air Force Base, and all of a sudden Annie says, "Stop!" And we're at the south gate of Randolph Air Force Base. And for a second, I was back in Antonio in the man's car in the front seat, and my sister and the boy from across the street who used to go with me were in the back seat. And then it was just normal again. But I had gone back unwittingly. I have no memory of turning off the highway and going onto that road at all. But I did it. And of course she wasn't much of a driver, and so she figured I knew where I was going until I was driving at 50 miles an hour straight toward a closed gate.
So you talked about it being a lot more active today.
Yeah, well, I want to. This question of why my parents allowed it. This is something they regretted, I think, for the rest of their lives. My mother, when she passed on, there was found in her personal effects, things that she kept private, the report card from my year from my second grade year, with all of those weeks, those months written out, absent due to illness, absent due to illness. And I think she really regretted it. And my sister, as soon as she saw that, she was under some kind of mind control. She took that report card and I never saw it again. And it would be evidence, of course, that it had really happened. But my parents were duped. The parents of the other boy were not duped, because he remembers the whole. I don't remember anything. My parents apparently volunteered me out of my hearing, or I was 7. The other boy was 9. It's a lot of difference between a 7-year-old mind and a 9-year-old mind.
Mhm.
And he remembers being in the room when the recruiting effort was made. And when the parents heard it involved the use of a Skinner box, they told the Air Force people immediately, no, we're not going to let our son get involved. And I would guess that my parents, who were much less savvy about stuff like that, probably didn't even know what they were talking about. And they probably appealed to their patriotism. And it didn't become obvious to my parents that something was wrong until my immune system collapsed. And then, of course, they, I think they regretted it greatly, that what they had done allowed to be done to me.
Yeah, my mother kept a lot of secrets from me about that period of time, and it wasn't until the last couple of years of her life that she started to sort of confess it to me. But she never went into the detail that I could remember. I could remember 2 men in hats and coming over to the house and her having them come in, and then they were talking about me, and like I wasn't there. Um,
Oh,
it
that's
it,
never
creep,
a
it
good sign.
it creeps me out to this day
Yeah, I'm sure.
because I have
Well,
no idea.
I wonder how many of us have had that experience. Probably a lot. I
I don't know.
wonder.
I'm watching chat right now, and there's usually a sort of a lag. There might be some people that speak of this because a lot of them um, are near our age or the same age or older,
Mm,
predominantly in this group. So Ann Carter's here, and of course Carter actually worked for you and Ann way back in the communion book days. Um,
yeah, that boy, I remember Ann Carter
yeah,
very
and
fondly.
she's right here right now, and she's been with us ever since we started this. And
Well, hello, Ann.
there's
Many memories.
a lot of amazing people in here, all thanking you, and it's wonderful.
Well, that's wonderful to hear.
But now, skipping forward and jumping ahead till today, while we still have a few minutes left, I personally think it's been more active lately. I've certainly have had things happen. I mean, just the other night, I had 2 nights where I woke up on top of the covers, freezing to death with the covers perfectly folded to one side and my arms right at my sides and my feet perfectly straight. You know the deal. And but on one of those nights, I told Mary it happened again, but I don't remember anything. She says, "Well, I do. I got up to go to the bathroom and you weren't in bed, so I checked the bathroom. You weren't in the bathroom. I have that room in the back where I work on slot cars and things, and I wasn't there. In fact, I wasn't anywhere in the house. So she just went back to bed and went back to sleep because that's how Mary takes this stuff. And that was Jilly. Jilly would have freaked out and called the police and wondered where I was, but I was missing. And that's not the only thing. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about how many things have happened to me lately and stuff, but it does seem to me that things are more active, more I'm just imagining things and I'm getting up in the night and then laying back on top of my covers, making no effort to cover myself up again so I can wake up freezing cold with my arms perfectly folded at my side. So I don't know. I mean,
Oh, can you still hear me?
yeah, I can hear you well.
There. Okay, I'm back again. I don't know where I went, but I'm still here. I don't know if you saw that. I dropped out for a second.
Okay.
Um,
Did you check your watch?
yeah. Oh hell, it's day after tomorrow. All of a sudden, um, I've had a lot going on lately. Uh, to uh, uh, because I'm working on a book, and I when I'm working on a book, my implant, which is here, is very active and working, and I have this 3 o'clock in the morning meeting using the implant where I work on the book, and uh, so I'm having I'm having contact every night. It's not like that normally when I'm not working on a book. Obviously, they're not coming every night, but uh, and it's not physical usually. Although this morning at 3, it was on that. It certainly on that end of the spectrum. There was a physical presence definitely.
Yeah,
And
it doesn't have to be.
no, and they asked me before I started the book to please turn off the cameras at night and the internet, to turn it all off, and the phone, because they're very freaky about, I've recorded them on an audio thing once, and the cameras have shown things and that I put up, I talk about.
Yeah.
It's not them. I wish it had shown them, but they don't want to be bothered with that, and they know that I had this muse, this girl, a young woman, not a girl, who was really brilliant, and she was almost as good at helping me with my work as Anne, and in some respects even better, because she had a more Anne was a very analytical mind, and this other person had a very creative mind. And they apparently didn't want her in the picture because for some unknown reason, she decides right as we're starting the new book, she doesn't want to work with me anymore. And I think to myself, oh, great. Now the one person I could use to do this and work with is gone. What am I going to do? And so the implant has stepped in, and it's much more active than it was on the last book, much more. And frankly, the implant is better than the young woman was by a long shot, a long shot. And so the book is really interesting work because I keep getting these fabulous conversations that are. I'm not going to tell you too much about the book, except
Oh no, of course not.
it's about our mind and their mind and the anatomy of our brain and the anatomy of their brain and how that all works and why it is that we are not inferior to them. We look like that to ourselves because we just don't know enough. But we have to, until we have gotten ourselves on what we feel is an equal footing, they're not going to come out. People always ask me, do they give you messages? And
They just did here, yeah.
the answer is yes. And there's a very simple message. They're not going to emerge into our world unless they have to. And that would mean if we are losing our planet, and essentially everyone on the planet knows that it's going, and we're going down with it. We have realized that we are living on the Titanic, and it's already 2:00 in the morning, and that ocean is real cold.
Yep.
Then they'll show up, not to save us, I don't think, not in the way we would hope, but that's when we will begin to have direct contact with them. Unless we get this together beforehand, and at least a group of us become able to interact with them on an equal footing. And people always say, well, why don't they just come out? We're ready. We're not ready. We're not ready because we don't know what this is. And all of my books, all of my work and your work and all of us who go out there and to get kicked around, and thankfully to get supported by wonderful people, which is I remember when there was no chat like this that's in here right now for sure.
No.
But we are doing this. This is up to us more than it is to the government, the Congress, the Defense Department, or even the visitors. It's us getting our heads around what this really is to us, what it means to us, and what it means to our lives. And it ain't going to be all pretty, but it's also going to belong to us. That's why my wife, who had more than genius level insight into all this stuff, called it communion in the first place.
So this just all makes perfect sense to me, and it's something that
let people talk
it's
about
deeply
certain
familiar.
years,
It's deeply familiar.
2027 and stuff, but I don't ascribe to that because I don't know that those years are right or wrong, but they've never told me anything specific about dates. The only
No,
thing I have is what I just said.
the message I got, and I did a show about it. They went through a lot of effort to get me in front of the gray that I've been seeing, the big tall one, female all my life, and a lot of other ones sitting around on a table. And they went through all this effort to get me there, which is humorous to me. And just to say, it's time, we're coming.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
it's going to be a big deal if they come. Boy, it's going to change
Yeah.
every single life.
But
Every life will change and forever.
sure. And it's the question too of how they're coming, and are they going to come from within us? And I think what you were talking about just now seems to suggest that. And we have to be on a level playing field, and we have to think about ourselves differently. And I don't know. I think that meditation is a big step in trying
It's
to
huge.
yeah, and I know that more and more people are doing that. I know Mary and I are practicing it quite often, if not daily. And we've been going to this church nearby where there's a Buddhist group there, and we've been meditating with them. They're incredible people, and having meditation meals where none of us talk, and you get this feeling that we've somehow expanded and we've connected with each other, and this makes it more possible for us to interact with something like the visitors on a level
Yeah.
that they can understand, and that we can be uh, relaxed and focused with. And so how do we get more people to do that? I mean, I know that most of the people on the planet will never be able to do it, and
No, that doesn't matter. You don't need a
yeah,
lot. You need
no,
you need the people who are doing it. That's who you
mhm,
need. These guys have got their group together. It's us and all of us, and um, they've chosen the people that can do that they think can are most likely to be able to handle this. And if even a small number of us can handle contact, then the whole species will come along behind us, and that's what it's really about. Fortunately, it doesn't need to be a whole lot. Uh, there's, I want to get back to the implant before we close out. We've just got a couple
sure,
minutes. The
sure,
implant works in very unusual ways. It does not talk to me. The implant, for example, I have to think if I'm working on something and I'm thinking a question, the implant will bring the information to me in one way or another. And or if I'm working inside my own mind, there's a slit that opens up in. I'm not in this eye. I'm not going to look at the camera because I can't put my finger in the right place. In this eye, and there are words racing through it. I've been given to understand by someone who explained the implant to me, who knew what they were talking about, that this is information that's underneath in my consciousness. It's under my consciousness, my unconscious level, and it's bringing it up from there to enhance my mind. And so these are some of the ways it works, but not all of them. It also is amazing with synchronicity. When you're working with, when you know the implant's working for you, when you start to have unbelievable synchronicities, and that all work toward the book, sometimes even in ways you haven't thought of. So this is this is how it works, and it used to make a noise, and it used to also get hot, and you saw it get hot one time, I think.
yes, and mine still does. Yes, I did see it, and more than
Yeah.
once.
It gets hot a little bit, but not hot enough to. Well, I take that back. I was with some friends about 6 weeks ago, and suddenly someone said, "Whitley, your ear is bright red." And I realized I didn't even think of it. I noticed, yeah, it's hot. I said, yeah, it gets hot sometimes, and I went on. Of course, everyone knew it was the implant because they know my life. But, uh, on my website, there's the video of the implant removal is available. The attempt, I should say, because when the implant was touched by the doctor's scalpel, it
It
escaped,
moved.
went down in my earlobe. It did not want to be removed at all. And thank God it wasn't, because I would be high and dry right now.
Hmm.
If I didn't have the implant, I don't think I could write the book. The muse flew the coop. So now
Yeah.
I've got the implant, and I think they had something to do with somehow engineering the muse's mysterious decision to quit, which was very mysterious. And they put something in her head somehow or another, because they wanted to do this directly, and that's what's happening.
I remember that night at Lee's house, Lee Mikowski, and I was telling you about the implant that's exactly almost in the same location as yours, and you seemed kind of surprised. I did tell you about it before, but you have a lot on your mind, and you said, "Well, let me see it. Where is it?" And you went to feel for it. I said, "Well, it's right here." I felt it, and I go, "Okay, it's right here." And you felt it, and it wasn't there, and I felt it, and it was gone. And then we're driving back up the coast one, and I felt this little bit of pain, and I felt this movement, and it was back. Now, I know
It
you
was
have,
playing games with us.
I guess, but the thing that came through for me in their usual short messages is that this was actually a piece of their tissue.
Mine is a piece of metal.
Yours is metal. This
they
is tissue. It is. She said it was from her, and it's been placed in me.
Oh,
You've
interesting.
ever heard that before?
No,
Not from anyone else.
no.
I don't know what to believe. I mean, this is what I got.
Roger Lear mostly got bits of magnetite out of people.
Right.
And, and the skeptics would say, well, they must have been hit by a meteor. Come
Yeah.
on. Be real. Of course,
with
they
human
weren't
nerve
hit by
cells.
meteors.
With
What?
human nerve cells growing out.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
we were present together watching those surgeries happening, and it was an amazing thing. It was also uncomfortable, as I recall.
I remember when my implant practically set my ear on fire during that show where you were showing one
I'm
picture
sorry.
of the rays after another. The implant is just going crazy, and my ears burning, and it's going nuts.
It's luckily it didn't burst into flames, because that would have been, yeah.
Wow. And I was always trying to convince Ann to let me get it taken out. And I said, well, what if it catches on fire? It gets hot all the time. She said, you've got 2 years. She was very adamant that it not be taken out. And that was one of those many very, very smart moves of hers. I wish that more people had them, A, and B, could use them. This is a real gift. And it's far too rare. I would like to see that. I would like to see more people able to use this wonderful tool. That's all I can say.
I'm using it for the work that I'm doing, and I'm working on a new film right now. That's all CG this time, because someone here suggested I do it. It's called Reality, and we'll talk more about that. But as I sit down at the word processor for writing screenplay, it just comes out. It just spills out. It's like it's just on tap. So I'm going to write about this, and I just do. And I've done that with 3 scripts so far, and I wonder if it's not working through me. Whitley, thank you so much for coming on and in closing the information you shared with us.
Well, it's always a pleasure, Steve.
Yeah, but about being on the same
you
level.
and Mary are a real blessing to this community. And I also want to thank this wonderful audience. I've been watching your chat as we've gone along, and it's a lot of cool stuff and a lot of good people here. And, the visitors are not stupid. They chose good people. For them, I think they did a good job of bringing us all together. They really
all
do.
those little kids that went out and looked up at the stars and pointed and said, I want to know about that. It seemed like that attracted them. So, all right, Whitley, I know you got work to do.
Yeah, well, I do.
Well, that's good.
Oh, before we go, one last thing. Here's something nobody probably will do anything about, but you should. Okay. I wrote a book of poetry. It's on Amazon. It's called A Hidden Garden. And do we have one more minute?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to read a poem from A Hidden Garden before we go. Assuming I can find it, which is another question entirely. Here's the poem book. It's This is the not too many poems in the book are about the visitors, but this one is, and it's about what it's like to be with them in the night when things are going well. I might add, they don't, that's not always true, and I'm looking for it very hard now.
It's okay. We've got time.
All right. Okay. All right.
Yes, you can buy the poetry book. And
Yeah,
and
go to the. You don't buy one. I'm sending you one. You guys, you and
thank you,
Mary, you're
Whitley.
going to get one in the mail.
I think I have the Strieber complete collection. now.
Thank you. Okay, here it is.
Thank you, Robert.
Somebody kissed me. Deep last night, somebody kissed me. I'm an old man and I live alone, but somebody kissed me. I'm not very pretty and was never very pretty, but they kissed me long. I wondered at their breath, soft, cool, and sweet as death. There was nobody here but me, there never is. But somebody kissed me, they kissed me long. The breath so soft, the lips so warm. I reached up into the air and found nobody there. But still they kissed me and kissed me long. An owl murmured, the leaves rustled, the curtains blew. The night left me behind, and that kiss did too. I don't belong to the sunlight and the day. I'm an old man, and I belong to the night and that kiss. I belong to that kiss too.
Thank you, Whitley. And thank all of you wonderful people. You've been hearing the bell. That's people that are helping support the channel. So
Okay, great. But listen, thank you for having me, Steve. I so enjoyed it.
me too. I just loved it. Thank you, Whitley.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. We'll see you all tomorrow for the premiere and the pre-premiere chat for our next episode, which is episode 22. Wow, 22 filmed episodes. So that's amazing. We love you all very, very much. We love your support and your community. Thank you. And thank you, Whitley.
Thank you.